All right, I have 12:45 and call the meeting back to order. As soon as we have Andy on, we will proceed. All right, it looks like we have everybody back on, so we'll proceed to item M, Council of Landscape Architectural Registration Boards. And I will ask Trish to start with the presentation.
Thank you. Agenda M1 is the review of the CLARB September 2021 annual meeting. You'll find that attached. The meeting is September 22 through 24. And this is just an opportunity for the committee to discuss the agenda and before we discuss other portions of the meeting, which will include M2, the elections, as well as one of the agenda items on Thursday regarding the implementation of the program.
So I guess the question I have is, how do we want to proceed through this? I'm assuming that everybody on the committee has had a chance to review the materials. And so I guess there will be some possible actions as part of this. But starting out with item 1, the annual meeting agenda. Does anybody on the committee have any particular questions, comments, concerns, or anything on what they're proposing to cover in the annual meeting? Yeah, I wanted to just point out a couple things. On Thursday, September 23rd, there will be a discussion on implementing the uniform standard. I guess it sort of implies that whatever their final proposal is, which we have not actually seen yet, will be voted and approved, and that at that point in time we will need to make a decision if it's different from our current regulations, whether or not we would proceed to change our regulations to come in line with what they're proposing. And then secondly, on Friday, September 24th, there is a session on increasing access and equity in licensure. And I know, speaking for myself personally, I'm still a little confused on this, in that, as far as I know, our exam is currently open to, and our license is currently open to anyone who wishes to pursue that, as long as they meet the qualifications. And I know there's been a lot of discussion both by CLARB, by ASLA, and other organizations in regards to equity issues and that type of thing, but I'm not really sure. Everybody seems to imply that it's a problem, but as far as I've seen, nobody's been able to explain to me exactly or precisely what that problem actually is and what the potential solutions are to address that.
John, I have a
Patricia?
question. Yeah. Who's going to be representing us?
Okay, I will be representing the committee at the meeting, and Trish will be attending the meeting as well as the board executive. And so that's the current plan. We'll be voting on that further on in this discussion.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Pamela Brief. Since I am new to the committee, one quick question. Once you return from the annual meeting, I would assume there's usually some report and then items make it into the agenda that we need to vote on subsequently. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that would be the case. If there's specific items that come up during the meeting that would require us to pursue, that would definitely be noted. And there would probably be, at our next meeting, there would probably be an agenda item just to kind of cover what the general outcome of the meetings were.
Right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Andy?
Yes, I think that the way that it's normally been done in the past is that the committee authorizes our representative, which in this case would be John, to vote in we'd authorize him to vote for our board. So the vote will have been taken by the time that we have our next meeting in November. So John would be reporting back to us, but unless there's any business that does not get concluded at the CLARB meeting, it'd be pretty much just reporting back, I think, is the way it's been done in the past.
Thank you, Andy.
Hi, this is Trish. I just want to clarify that action will be covered under agenda M2, where the LATC will be asked to allow those that are attending to make the vote on behalf of the.
So it does not look like there's any questions. A question for council. Do we wait until we go through all three of these items before asking for public comment?
I was just looking at that, and these are some large items, so it might be fruitful to go ahead and do public comment on each one.
Okay.
Probably could wait and but I would recommend doing public comment on each one because of how voluminous the attachments are. And
thank you. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, comments, anything from the committee? If
yes, hi John. I'm sorry. This is Ron Jones. If I could, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. If it's appropriate for me to comment, I'd like to.
Okay. Yes.
I think it's worth noting that the architectural board is challenging, is sort of working our way through some of the same issues, particularly in the area of diversity and equity. We are just completed or just attended the NCARB national meeting last month, and I think diversity is an extremely important issue. Imagine if the landscape industry was 99% male. The absence of women as participants in the industry should be reason for cause for all of us, because there's a perspective that that they provide that we can't, that we just, the industry strengthens itself and becomes a much dynamic industry with the inclusion of both women, ethnic minorities, and the like. So I think diversity is extremely important in that paradigm. I also wanted to mention before we move the agenda that as both Tien and I spoke offline, it appears as though California is not represented on the registration board, and this may not be because of where we are in the process at the time. But we would strongly encourage members of the committee to consider throwing their hat in the ring for future opportunities to serve in leadership roles. And I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I will share that I did go through the process this year, seeking a position on the CLAR board. And they did make me an offer, but it was not for the CLAR board. It was for the basically the advisory committee. And it would have been a situation where we would have been, had I accepted that position and I did decline it, I would have been in a situation where I would have been nominating other people for the board, and I would have been required to serve in that position for 3 years before I would be, or anyone else would be able to apply for a position with the board. And one of the reasons why I declined that is it was partly because of all the other obligations that I have once the offer was made, but it is also because I did not want to preclude myself from being able to apply again for essentially another 2 years before I would be considered again. And I would encourage anybody that's interested in applying. I totally agree. I think based on the number of licensees that we have in within the total licensee cohort across the country, that I think California should have more direct representation on the CLARB board. But unfortunately, CLARB apparently has other objectives, and for whatever reason did not seriously consider my candidacy this year in that regard. So I totally agree, Ron, with yours and Tien's concerns in that regard, but in some respects we can apply, but it's up to the CLAR board to decide who they want in there, and not sure how to encourage them, but that it is something that I plan on bringing up at the national meeting. So.
And John, it's worth mentioning that NCARB has an unofficial roadmap to its board as well. It's pretty circuitous. You have to go through, and I think Laura, maybe a 3 to 5 year path to get there. And from what I've been told, is there's really no way around that process.
Right. Yeah. The other issue is that the directors on CLARB are appointed, they're not elected, and so they choose who the nominees are. There's not even really a process per se that you go through for those positions. They choose and appoint who they want to see in there. We'll be discussing that in the next item here. Andy? Oh, you're muted.
Just wanted to bring up a point that this is new for this year. Up till now, the directors have been elected. And we had regions. So we had 5 different regions, and there was regional directors, and there was also alternate directors. I was the Region 5 alternate director before they made the changeover. So this is new for them to have appointed positions rather than elected positions. So, I mean, I think this is the first cycle that they're going through with it in this particular way. So, you know, certainly bring up your concerns about it, because I'm sure they'd be interested to see or hear about, you know, how well that worked. I think pretty much what it was, the reason why they went to this appointed positions rather than elected positions, they were having a difficult time getting enough qualified people to apply for these different positions. So I think as a way of being able to fill the positions that they needed, they changed their structure, and they modified how those positions were filled. So anyway, I just thought I'd point that out, just so you have kind of a more of a historic perspective on it.
Right. Patricia?
Yeah, so, yeah, I think it would be real appropriate to ask a few questions, and that the process is a little bit more transparent. My experience was they contacted me, and I said I was a little too busy at the time because I just started as a trustee. And then when I did go to apply, like 2 years later, I was turned down. So,
Yeah.
so you know, it's just, I think if they are going to appoint people, I think they need to have some policies on how the process works.
Right. Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is I know that I was told by them this year, because I talked with a couple of the current directors, that, as Andy said, this was kind of the first time that they've done this, but all of a sudden this year they had a glut of candidates. So it's sort of like they, rather than just wait and see, they just decided going forward, this is the way we're going to do it. And then it turns out that they had all kinds of people that were interested. So, like Andy suggests, I think, we probably need to have a discussion on this at the national meeting.
Well, again, one other thing, it's interesting that they had a glut of candidates, but prior to this, they had a rule that you had to have attended 2 annual meetings, CLARB annual meetings, to qualify for a board position. And I think that's what was one of the reasons why they were having difficulty in filling those positions, is they couldn't find people who met that criteria. So they changed it up. So anyway, enough of that.
Just a little bit more history too. So this is when I headed up LATC and I attended the meeting. You know, they, how do I phrase this? My mind just went blank, so never mind.
Yeah, that tends to happen with CLARB.
Oh, I know what it was. So another thing that they changed was, and they voted on it and everything. You know, in the past, it's always been landscape architects that were part of CLARB, and so that's changed now. So, you know, they've opened it up, and I noticed, you know, the roster of people that are running, you know, one of them is not a landscape architect. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, if there's no further questions or comments, I will open this particular item up to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will open up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment. All right, this is a moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right, thank you. All right, we will move on to item 2, review and possible action on 2021 CLAR Board of Directors and Leadership Advisory Council elections ballot. And I again will ask Trish to present this.
Thank you. So the final slate of candidates for the 2021 Board of Directors and Leadership Advisory Council elections are attached. Also attached is the CLARB memorandum regarding letter of delegate credentials for the 2021 CLARB annual meeting, along with the template credential letter, which provides voting representatives and the 2021 ballot, which staff will complete to submit to CLARB by the September 16, 2021 deadline. Election of results will be announced during the business session of the 2021 annual meeting on September 24. The committee is asked to review the final set of candidates for the 2021 Board of Directors and Leadership Advisory Council and take possible action in determining how the LATC will vote in the election.
All right. I guess I will open this up for discussion. If any of the committee members have any first thoughts, comments on this. I know I have been through here and have basically marked up who I personally would vote for, but I'll open it up to everyone else and hear what your thoughts are on that. Andy?
I only know 2 people that are currently listed. Allison Fleury, I've met her and talked to her in the past, and Joel Kurokawa, who we probably all might know. He served as Region 5 director, so which, you know, California was or is in Region 5. So, so those are the 2 people that I know. I'm not familiar with anybody else that's on the ballot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Allison Fleury is the current treasurer, and then Carissa McMullen, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she has been a well, not entirely sure of her background. I know that she's had extensive experience with CLARB, and she is currently she's from the state of Kansas and has extensive board service as well as CLARB service. And I believe that Allison Fleury is from the state of Wyoming.
This is Pamela. That's correct,
Mhm.
Mr. Chair.
Right. All right. Do we, I guess the question is there a preference? My thoughts were that we would probably look for a candidate that's going to serve in that position that might be a little more aligned with some of the concerns or interests that we would have here in California. And for that reason, even though Allison has served as treasurer, that my preference would be for Carissa McMullen. She just seems to have more experience in regards to dealing with a lot of different situations and and so that's what my thought process was on that.
John, are we
Yes,
gonna
Susan.
go, are we gonna go group by group, or do you want to jump around on different people?
I'm thinking, why don't we go like position by position, and then it'll probably be easier that way.
I would make the comment that under Carissa, I find it interesting. She's applying for president-elect candidate, but she lists her own weakest leadership skill as intentional learning. And I would think in the president-elect candidate that learning would be something that they would not rate as their weakest.
Mm-hmm.
If I could make a comment to that, because I had filled out an application as well before withdrawing it, but you didn't have, they gave you the categories for what your strongest points might be and what your weakest points might be. You just, there wasn't, you didn't have the ability to just come up with something on your own. You had to choose from their selection. So it's possible that she picked that one because it was the, who knows why she might have picked it. But anyway, their selection criteria is a little odd. I found myself, but anyway, if we can move this along, do we want to take a vote on either Allison or Carissa for president-elect?
I suppose that's one way we could do it. The other thing I'd like to just make a general comment. I agree with you, Andy. I think that it would kind of be nice to know what the specific criteria is that CLARB is utilizing when they vet all the candidates and you know, how they make their determination on who they think the the strongest candidates are, especially in the case where they're appointing directors.
This is Patricia. I was also just going to comment, Carissa seems to have a lot more, experience, board service. I thought Allison's comments were, the information was pretty light.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if you're entertaining motions,
Yes.
I would then like to make a motion that we select Carissa McMullen as our candidate for president.
I would like to second that. This is Pamela.
All right. I'll take just a really quick, well, let's see. We'll hold the motion until after public comment, and we'll roll up all of the motions for each one of these into one motion at that point.
Okay,
For treasurer, Mark Aragoni and Joel Kurokawa, I spoke before my interview for the position, or before the interview that I had, because you didn't know what position Clark was actually interviewing you for. I did speak at length with Joel, and he seemed to have a real good sense of what the concerns are of Region 5 in general. And I think that he, I know this is for the treasurer position, but it's kind of a foregone conclusion that after he serves in that position, he'd probably be nominated for president-elect. And I think he would be an excellent candidate based on everything that I heard him speak. And I think of the two candidates, I think he's the one that we would definitely be much more aligned with. And so I would recommend that we nominate him, or register that's who our preference is. So does someone want to make a motion to that effect? Or
yeah, I'll make a motion that we select Joel Kurokawa as treasurer.
I'll second. This is Patricia.
all right. So we have that motion. I think as far as the Leadership Advisory Council, there's two candidates, and you pick two candidates of the two, so it's kind of a foregone conclusion that both of those will be voted in. I guess the only choice that we would have would be to vote for, not to vote for one or the other, or neither. But just based on the bios that I read for both of those, I think they both seem satisfactory.
I would like to make a motion that we leave Daniel Briggs and Julia Manley in as noted, with no exception.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have that. I know that we also have the three people that we've been notified are being appointed into the Director at Large positions. Leanne McNally is actually currently serving as one of the at-large directors, so she's essentially just being reappointed for another term. Craig Coronado is from Colorado, and not really sure. He served in a number of capacities with Clark in the past. The one person that I had some concern about was Tina Ganguly. She's with the state of Washington, but there's nothing in here at all that indicates what her current position is. Is she a board executive with the state of Washington? Is she a public member on their board? there's nothing to that effect. And from what I can see here, she has no experience in as a landscape architect or doing that type of work. So that's why I was really curious what the reason was that she was being appointed as a director. Thus, my question in regards to, what's the criteria that they're utilizing, and that's something else that I intend to ask at the public meeting or at the annual meeting. So, Pamela?
There, you were just speaking about the directors at large, is that correct?
Yes.
In the information that Trish sent out to us last night, they were included in that information. And I'm looking at Tina's bio, and there's a bachelor's degree, commerce and economics, and postgraduate degree in mass communication.
Right.
To answer your question or to go along with your comment, as far as her not being a landscape architect.
All right. Let's see. We are also going to need a motion. Well, let's see. Yeah, we're also going to need a motion on this one to approve myself as delegate and Trish as representative in attendance on the letter of delegate credentials for the CLARB annual meeting. So I guess we'll make, when we vote on this and the slate that we'll be supporting, we can make it all as one motion for that. So if there's no further comments or questions or anything from the committee, I will go ahead and open this up for public comment.
All right. This is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on this agenda item, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, this is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Mr. Chair, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, this is Michael Pinocchio, your legal counsel. Since we do have a motion on the floor with regard to the slate of candidates, I'd suggest that you conduct a vote on that based on this last public comment period, and then move on to another motion.
Right, okay. All right, so the motion then would be to support Carissa McMullen for president-elect, Joe Kurokawa for treasurer, and Daniel Biggs and Julia Manley for Leadership Advisory Council. That would be the motion. Do I have someone to affirm that? And,
I affirm that.
okay, and do we have a second?
I second. This is Patricia.
Okay, Patricia. All right, based on that motion, I will take a roll call vote. Andy Bowden,
Aye.
Pamela Brief,
Aye.
Susan Landry, Patricia Trouth,
Aye.
And John Roshinsky is aye. So the motion carries. All right. We will make a second motion, or I guess the second motion is to approve John S. Roshinsky as delegate and Trish Rodriguez as representative in attendance on the letter of delegate credentials for the September 22nd, 2021 CLARB annual meeting. Do we have any discussion on this? Okay.
I believe someone should make a motion and there should be a second on this to be official.
Right.
So I will make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
What our chair just said,
Okay.
to be quick and succinct.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second this, Patricia.
Okay. So we have a motion, or we have a motion. Mr. Counsel, do we have to go out to public comment on this one as well?
Yes, we should, Mr. Chair, on each motion.
Okay. All right. So I will open this up for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, this is the moderator. I see no request for comment at this time. Mr. Chair, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right. Thank you. All right. Any further comment? Questions? Hearing none, I will call for a roll call vote on the motion. Andrew Bowden,
Aye.
Pamela Brief,
Aye.
Susan Landry,
Aye.
Patricia Trouth,
Aye.
and John Roshinsky. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. All right, we will move on to the third item, discuss some possible action on CLARB uniform standards and pre-approval process. And I will ask Trish to present this.
Thank you. So at our meeting on September 4th last year, CLARB representatives presented an overview of the proposed standardization recommendations for their Rethink Regulation initiative. Statutory changes may be required to implement qualifications and procedures that they are proposing. CLARB held a pre-approval information session on May 13th of this year to cover pre-approval versus direct registration, initial steps board can take, and the political environment. Presentation slides from the sessions are attached. During the upcoming annual meeting, member boards will discuss implementing the uniform standards for licensure. However, I'd just like to note that we have not been presented with what those uniform standard proposed changes are. CLARB will discuss for meeting their envisioned future, which includes their responsibilities for standards, data clearinghouse, and the validation and verification, as well as research. Board functions they envision to consist of license, enforcement, outreach, and education. The committee is asked to discuss and take possible action on the information presented herein prior to the upcoming annual meeting. Although, like I said, at this time, we do not have what the uniform standards are that may be presented. So, no.
All right, thank you. I do know that apparently the CLAR board this month will be reviewing the proposed uniform standards and the uniform application, and we'll be making a decision on that, which will be presented at the annual meeting. It's not, it hasn't been determined if there will be any kind of a vote or anything by the members to accept that at this point in time. But I guess the potential is there. So based on that, I think it's definitely worth going through and kind of reviewing at least some of the information that they've presented on what may end up being in the uniform standard, just so that we all understand that and can agree on a potential course of action in the event that we're asked to respond to that. I think one area is if you look in your materials in their presentation, there is a section labeled Elements of Uniform Standard, and they have 3 options listed. Actually, 4 options that are listed in here, and what they've been looking at. Option 1 would be the LAB, LAC accredited LA degree with 2 years of experience, and then the LAR exam. Option 2 would be would include that one, as well as education through practical experience. In other words, it would be an experience-only path that they have listed here, at least tentatively, that would require 8 years of experience, of which at least part would have to be under a licensee. Option 3 would essentially be those 2, in addition to a non-accredited bachelor's or master's degree program, as well as including a 2-year associate's or certificate program. And under that scenario, it would require a minimum of 6 years of practical experience after receiving the degree or the certificate. And then the 4th option is candidate determined, whatever that means. I guess that would mean that you would tell them whether you feel you're qualified or not. So, as Patricia has stated, we do not know what their final recommendation is going to be, because that's still being discussed internally to them and will be presented at the annual meeting. But that's essentially the information that we have on hand right now.
I have a question, John.
Yes.
This is oh, there's no page number on here. Well, it's the first page, agenda item M3, second paragraph. Because I've just never heard this before, but it's about midway down in that paragraph. It's saying, however, the standard allows candidates to take the LARE with a LAAB accredited degree and gain experience prior to licensure rather than prior to examination. So, I'm wondering, how would you manage that? You know, typically, I mean, I get, paperwork asking me to fill it out from my staff to, confirm that they have the experience. So I'm just wondering if anybody knows anything else about this.
Well, I think from what I've heard and read and what's been presented by them is that they sort of what they're proposing is as long as you have an LAB accredited degree, in some respects you're good to go, and that you can take sections 1 and 2 right out of school, and then you can apply to take the other 2 sections basically at any time, and then the standard would be that you, even though you pass the entire exam, you could not actually apply for licensure in your state until you had that minimum amount of experience. So essentially what they're saying is that you can take the entire exam basically right out of school, but you can't get licensed until you actually gain the number of years experience until, until you have that. That's all the materials that I've reviewed and everything. That's kind of what they're insinuating. And I know that in the opportunities to ask questions and stuff in a couple of their presentations, I raised that issue directly with them, and they kind of just danced around that. They never really came out and said exactly what they're implying. Because in some respects, I even question whether or not candidates should be able to take sections 1 and 2 right out of school. Because I think there's obvious health, safety, and welfare implications with either one of those sections that that I think can only be gained through practical experience, that you can't fully understand or appreciate all the possible issues that might come up just strictly on education. But it is, that decision was made previously, and that's basically what's on the books right now. So anyway, that's just from my experience, that's kind of what my understanding of it is.
I guess I guess I just want to be clear on logistics. So once a person has passed all 4 sections, they apply for licensure, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess I just don't understand how we are going to be monitoring the experience, aspect of the requirements.
Yeah, and that's a point that I brought up with them on numerous occasions, is because essentially, well, the question I asked them is who's going to monitor these, the experience. Is it going to be CLARB's going to monitor that? Is it going to be the states themselves? Who's really going to make that determination? And they sort of insinuated that as long as you have an LAB degree, that they would be partly responsible for that, because that would be part of your CLARB record. And that once you, and that the states would rely on the candidate's CLARB record for that information. The other issue that I brought up, and they've sort of admitted, is that as long as you go through the traditional path of a LAB degree, everything should be straightforward. But for cases like in California, where we have alternative paths to licensure, are they going to be taking that on as well? And they sort of insinuated no, that for the alternative paths, it would be the states themselves that would make the judgment on whether or not a candidate is actually qualified or not. So, and the other thing on this as well is their intention is that once they have a uniform standard and a uniform application process, that candidates would just go directly to them when they're interested in starting the licensing process, rather than states pre-qualifying candidates like we currently do here in California.
Unless you have some other methodology you're using to qualify, because some of it, as you said, they're not interested in managing that. So if it's
Right.
The pathway is experience only, they don't want to have anything to do with that. I see that as a fundamental problem.
Right. And we know that there are candidates out there that are interested in qualifying under experience only. So, and that's partly because I know one instance that they have a foreign degree that probably would qualify them if they were lab accredited, but it's not, and so they can't utilize that for and that's another area that there's been some question about, is because there's so much more international practice and there's a lot of potential candidates that are educated overseas or practice overseas. How do you handle that situation? So, Pamela, you had a comment?
Yes, hi, Pamela Brief. Just wanted to state that they do reference in this paragraph, they're referencing the CCR, our California Code of Regulations, specifically as it covers some of those items that we're discussing, and it does say that that these code sections may be affected. But then in the sentence before, it says that there may be statutory or regulatory changes required to implement qualification and procedural changes. So I'm a little unclear as to whether CLARB is trying to say that it's going to affect our state decisions, but I don't think they can do that. So what I initially read before we started talking about this today was, I was reading it that they were saying there might be statutory, in our case, the California Code, that might supersede this and not allow them to do certain things that they're proposing by nature of our state code.
Mm-hmm.
But now that Patricia is talking about this,
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure that that's actually what they're saying as I'm rereading this. So I guess my point that I want to make is, I'm now unclear where I thought I was clear before. I don't think they're succinct in saying what they're proposing here and why they're bringing that up.
Andy?
Yeah, thank you. I think something that we may need to step back just for a second and realize is that, the last go around, they were calling this the model law. And, we voted on the model law. So, and again, they can't dictate that. They can't say that everybody has to use it. It's
right.
a model to base your regulations on, because some states don't have very much in the way of regulations. Some states only have a Title Act. They don't have a Practice Act.
Right.
So it was a way of being able to assist those jurisdictions with coming up with something. So now in the case of California, we're a little bit more unique than some of the other states, most of the other states, and that is, we're kind of required to have multiple paths to licensure in order to keep existing. And again, I don't mean to go back in history, but back in the 1995 era, when we lost the State Board of Landscape Architects and we came back in 1996 or 97, whatever it was, as the LATC. That was that was kind of like one of the provisions of our existence, was we had to have multiple paths of licensure. And even during, I think, our first sunset review after we became the LATC, was, well, what are you going to do in order to maintain or create paths to licensure that aren't barriers to entry? So that's, kind of been, our directive, that we have to dance that dance that other states may not have to. Everybody's using the barrier to entry terminology these days, but I think California was probably one of the first ones that got hit with that. So I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case, but that seems to be the way it is right at the moment.
Mhm.
So now taking a look at the elements of uniform standard that they're trying to impose, or they'd like us to adopt, let's put it that way. Again, they can't force us to do this. I mean, all they can do is just say, look, we strongly suggest that if we all agree across the nation that having a uniform standard would be the ideal thing to have. And I think everybody would say, yeah, that'd be great. But trying to implement it is going to be really difficult, because we're going to have to be changing regulations and statutes and, all kinds of stuff. And we're not the only ones. So, I mean, New York, Florida, Texas, all the big states are going to have to battle with this in order to try and make it so that it works for them. What I think that we would do is that if we were to say, well, in concept, we agree, but there are some elements that we're probably not going to be able to comply with, because it's just going to be, I mean, I can't see us changing all these regulations. I mean, and especially after we just went through the whole experience, only pathway that we only just recently adopted. And then having to revisit that again, because that took like 5 years for us to get to that point.
Yeah.
I can't imagine we'd reopen that can of worms again. And after having just recently, gotten through it and voted on it and approved it, and then open it back up again and say, oh, you know what, here it is. Now CLARB is wants us to adopt this. So I think we just have to do what's practical for us, what's right for the the people of California, and we just do the best we possibly can, using this as kind of a basis. But again, it's just a model. It's not saying that we have to adopt it 100%. We could
Right.
we could adopt 80% of it, and in fact we probably are close to that anyway.
Mhm.
So I think that when they wrote this, actually, California provided a lot of the information that's in this uniform standard. So I don't think we're that far apart necessarily, but I don't think that we can just, radically change what we're doing and take on theirs 100% and, have everybody feel good about it. I think we'd end up with roadblocks along the way.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I know that one side of this that we also have to look at is reciprocity, and what are we willing to accept here? What are our licensees, if they're applying in other states, what are they going to have to put up with? I know the one thing that I was a little concerned about was that it looks like in the case of an associate's degree or the certificate program, which as far as I know, I think we have the only one, is that they would require 6 years of practical experience in addition to the degree or the certificate. Whereas I think currently here in California, we have a total of 6 years that are required, which includes the certificate and the practical experience. So personally, I would have any any would have issues with anything that becomes more restrictive than what our current requirements are. And I think in that particular case, it would be more restrictive because it would require additional years of experience. But we have to wait and see what their final proposal is going to be. And the other side of it too is that they basically want to eliminate the pre-approval process. So again, they can't force us to relinquish that. But I know it's something that they're going to be requesting. Patricia?
Yeah, question. So, are we trying to vote on something when we don't really even know what we're voting on?
I'm not even really sure if we can make a motion on this. I know when I attend the meeting, I'm thinking if something does come up that that we're asked to vote on or something, it would be good to have a general idea of what the thoughts of the committee are. But I would almost abstain from that vote just simply because we haven't been given adequate time to review and discuss that. And if anything, I would make a motion at the meeting that they put off the vote until such time that all the member boards do have time to review and consider the ramifications of what they're proposing.
This is Pamela.
Yeah, Pamela.
I agree with that, Mr. Chair. I think that would be that would make a lot of sense because there are, I mean, this is robust and to be able for us to think about every option that might be presented, we would be here past today doing that. And I think having that time to review would be beneficial not only for us, but also for every board.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Patricia.
So I'm going back to that, what I read earlier. Maybe they can give us a little more insight on how they think this would work because it sounds confusing to me. I don't understand. I don't understand how it would work. So, and I guess I'm trying to understand the value that it adds. I don't get it. Yeah.
Well, if I can maybe comment on that, Patricia. I mean, I think we were presented with all the requirements that all the different states had for licensure back when we were doing the whole experience, criteria thing. I mean, it was all over the map. So, I mean, there's, it's different between us and Arizona or us and Nevada. I mean, the requirements just even to practice in the Western United States varies from state to state to state. So I think their whole viewpoint of it is if there's some kind of uniformity that makes it a little bit easier for reciprocity candidates or, things along that line, or just knowing that, what's required in the state that you happen to reside in is going to be equally acceptable to a state that you want to move to. I saw something in our code that I was reading during lunch, and it says that, I'm paraphrasing this, so excuse me if I'm getting it wrong because I can't find it right now to actually read it to you, but it basically says that all LAIR scores that are taken before you meet the eligibility in California will not be counted. So it means you could take the LAIR exam outside of California, but you haven't met our eligibility requirements. So when you come to California, it doesn't matter that you took the LAIR exam, it's not going to be counted. I don't know if I've got that right. That's what I thought I understood it to say. So if somebody could correct me on that, I'd appreciate it. But I thought that was kind of interesting when I saw that. As, so again, I mean, we're different than some of our adjoining states, and the states back east, they have their requirements, and it's just a mishmash of all kinds of different stuff. So if there is some kind of uniformity that can be achieved through through a joint agreement through all the states, that to me that makes some sense. So how you go about that, gosh, I have no idea. I mean, this is looking through this. I mean, I hate to use the word pipe dream, but I mean, in some sense, that's almost kind of what this is. I mean, you're looking through this, going, "Wow, this would be great if it was a perfect world," but it's maybe not feasible for us for all items. A lot of the items are achievable, I think, and we're probably already doing them. But there are some that we're probably not going to agree to. So, and I think that that's okay. I think we do what we can do, and those that we can't, we just say, well, gosh, it'd be great if we could, but we're not going to be able to do that. So, and we just kind of hold fast to that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. If we can be consistent in various ways, I think that's advantageous, from both ends for the candidate as well as, the state as they're managing all of this. But, logistically, I don't understand how they would, how they would manage somebody gaining experience after they've taken the LAIR, but
well, if you
they
recall,
still have to get what? I'm sorry.
If you recall the conversation that we were having when we were just going through the whole experience issue a couple of years ago, and I was kind of advocating for having some kind of program where that gets monitored, just like how the architects have. So, and we even asked CLARB if they would, come up with something for that, and they said no. So I think even Patricia, weren't you the one that approached them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we, I was just looking at what NCARB does, and they have this whole internship program.
Right. Exactly. So that was my point, was that, and if you recall, I was saying that, that we should have an internship program, a structured internship program similar to what the architects had. And, it just kind of stopped at that point because it didn't seem like it was going to be feasible. CLARB wasn't going to take it on. And, if we were trying to do this nationwide, I don't know who else would do it. I don't know if ASLA or somebody like that would have to take it on, but that didn't really seem reasonable. So, and that's when we went on our experience only pathway, and we said, okay, that's fine. But it's like, okay, well, who is, what's the right word? Who's approving this experience only, or approving any experience? And we looked at the forms that we currently have in California. It's like a 1 or 2 page thing that the employer checks off. You filled them out. I filled them out. John, you've probably filled them out. Susan probably has too, where you just check it off and just say, okay, they're good in this, and they're good in this, and good in this. You sign your name, put a date, bump, done. And that's it. That doesn't seem to me to be, very
Rigorous.
authoritative.
Yeah.
So that was my whole issue with it back then. I don't mean to rehash old history, but still, it's one of these things where we're now revisiting that whole conversation 2 years later, because now they're bringing it up. So I don't think they like the fact that California did that pathway. I think they were kind of very surprised that we did that. But
well, I mean, there are other states that already have that in place.
Arizona has it. They've had it, and we actually had it before. It's just that and that was when we were the state board of landscape architects. We had an experience only pathway, and then later on, it just kind of went away. I'm not exactly too sure what changed or when it changed, but anyway. But if you look at the options that they've got, the options themselves are not far off from what we already do. We already do option one, and
Yeah.
option two, we have most of it. It's just that, yeah, I think option two we have. I don't know what is our
6.
experience only
6 years.
is 6 years. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're a little bit different on that one,
Mhm.
but not by much. We do most of option three.
Where option 3 differs is on the certificate program,
Right,
as I see it.
right. So we'd have to, and again,
It adds
we
4 years,
we
if I'm not
give
mistaken.
we give credit for our certificate program, and we also give credit for associate degrees.
Mhm.
But I don't think the rest of the country does, or at least not many states give credit for associate degrees. So again, we differ than other states in that regard. And I have no idea what this option 4 is. I've never heard of this candidate.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Pay to play.
Yeah.
Well, candidate determined, how does that,
I don't
based
know.
on what? And who even if it's candidate determined, there has to be someone processing that information, right? So
Right.
who
So
is that agency that's taking care of that?
Yeah, so I would think that when John goes and making his pitch to Clarb, he brings that up and says, well, where's the criteria for this? What does this even mean? I don't even know even how you can put it on here for us to even consider when there's no explanation of what it is.
Yeah.
So so I think option 4 to me isn't even viable as an option at this particular moment in time.
Can I add in here, all we're listing is all these questions. And I think it was John who said, do we make a motion on this? Can we make a motion? And what I'm feeling now with everybody's conversation is we cannot make a motion. We don't have enough answers. And maybe John can take all the questions we've been asking, or staff can summarize them to then take that to the conference.
Right. I totally agree. There's really nothing to make a motion on because, we're not being actually asked to vote on anything at the meeting at this point, as far as we know. But like I said, if something does come up, I will recommend or make a motion at the meeting to postpone any vote until such time that all the member boards have a chance to review. So,
is this something that we can submit our questions enough ahead of time that they may have some answers while you're there?
I can tell you that in the few meetings that they've had where they've presented this, we have asked these questions. They're fully aware of, what the issues are. Now, we can't speak to, every state, but I know that in the meetings that I've been in where this has been presented, there have been other states that have been online, and the concerns are pretty similar in regards. I think the biggest one, probably for us and for a number of other ones, is in our case, we pre-qualify the candidates where they have to apply to us before they apply to CLARB to take the exam. And, that's our way of ensuring that they, that they are making progress on their experience and that it's legitimate and that there's no other particular issues that might come up that we would have to deal with in the future.
So during those meetings, was any of the questioning put in writing? Because to me, it seems like if we would have something come out with our letterhead from the state, that it may be they have to take like better consideration for that. I just document, put it in writing, be on the record.
You know, that's a good question, because typically at these meetings, it was like the first time that this stuff was presented. And you know, we didn't know ahead of time what was going to be presented. So it wasn't until after the fact that we really, you know, would be able to put those questions together. When it was presented, both myself and Trish, who are typically on these calls, you know, we're just kind of responding to what was there. And, you know, we made our comments, raised our concerns at that point in time. Supposedly, Clarb was making note of all these questions and issues, which were going to be presented to their board when they were discussing this matter. Now, what they actually presented to their own board in that regard, who knows, because we don't have representative there, and so we don't know what the discussions really are.
So in that vein, I would say let's get this formalized, writing a letter and submitting it officially within whatever time period of the meeting. The letter has to be included in any kind of agenda, or whether it's, we call it a desk item, that all written comments are included in the packet. Versus, because we don't know, we weren't at the meeting, we don't know if any of this was, how much or if any was brought up. So I am encouraging us to write a formal letter with LATC letterhead on it, submit it in the appropriate time period so it does become part of the official packet and the agenda discussion.
Okay, I can work with Trish on that, as far as you know, letting them know what sort of our expectations are. You know, we want to be essentially informed ahead of the meeting if, you know, what the outcome of any discussion, their board discussions are, and that type of thing. You would think that that would be public record, but who knows? And the other thing I'd like to bring up is, besides Trish and I attending the meeting in person, we do have an opportunity for one more of our committee to attend virtually, at least all or in part of the meeting. So when those particular items come up in their meeting schedule, it might be good to have at least one of us, besides the two of us that are there in person, to be on there too, just so that you know, we just have one more set of eyes and ears that are listening in and seeing what's going on in that regard. Because I know I've spoken with Trish at length about this, and I think one of the plans that we have are actually talking to some of the other key states, you know, to get their input on what their thought process is on this, so that you know, we're not blindsided by you know, something that comes up or whatever. Andy? Oh, you're muted.
Famous last words.
Yeah.
You're right.
I wasn't
The
really
phrase of the
speaking.
last year and a half, you're on mute.
I wasn't really speaking. My mouth was just moving. I wasn't speaking. So
Were you trying your Quizimogen or something. I can't even pronounce it. So
Yeah.
there, I'm going to stop talking.
I was
Reading.
practicing.
We got to get better at lip reading.
So number one, I agree. Writing a letter, would probably be beneficial at this point. But getting back to the actual some of the things that they've got in there that they're proposing, when they start talking about the pre-approval, direct versus pre-approval method, this is, I think, where we take the most exception to. And I understand it because I happened to attend the architects board meeting, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where this kind of came up with them as well. The idea of trying to reduce the amount of time that it takes to go through to become licensed. So understanding that, from that viewpoint, you can see where they're coming from. However, what they want to have happen is that somebody starts the council record and then takes the test during the first 2 years while they're gaining experience. And I think this kind of relates back to our whole discussion of the pass rates. So, I mean, if we're having issues with pass rates now, you can just imagine what issues we'd have with pass rates when they're allowed to take the exam without having the proper experience to kind of help guide them. I mean, I can see the pass rates dropping significantly, in my opinion. Now, I know I see this other chart that they've got saying pass rates by board requirements. It's like, well, I'm not sure I'm buying into that part of it.
Right.
I'm not saying that it's inaccurate. I'm just saying, well, where's your data that backs that up? So, so that's the part of this that I've got a little heartburn over. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if John can capture these the main topic of these big discussion items and submit a letter, and it also wouldn't hurt to send it out to the other states for their purview prior to the meeting, gives them a chance to say, hey, yeah, I agree with that. I hadn't thought of that. Let's add that to the conversation. So the more distribution on the letter, the better.
All right. I don't know if we need a motion to do that, since I've already been actively working with Trish to, discuss and deal with these issues. I think the biggest thing right now is we're just kind of waiting to hear back from CLARB, because apparently once their board discusses and votes or whatever they're going to do on this, that they're supposed to be sending information out to all the member boards. How soon they're going to do that, I don't know, but I can discuss a plan with her on how to proceed on this.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we've had our discussion on this item. If there's no other further discussion, I'll open it up to any public comment on this one right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have opened up the question and answer panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type, I would like to make a comment, using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Mr. Chair, shall I close the Q&A panel?
All right. Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right. Thank you. All right. I think that concludes item M. I think we voted on the motions that we made previously on that one. So what I'll ask is the next item where we're going to be talking about potential CEs. Do we want to take a really quick break before we get started in on that? Because I think this one might be a little lengthy. So why don't we take a short 5-minute break? Let's say at 2:20 we'll be back. All right, I have 2:20. I'll call the meeting back to order. Next item, discuss and possible action on 2019-2021 strategic plan objective to research the need for continuing education for licensees through LATC, the American Society of Landscape Architects, or another organization to better protect the health, safety, and welfare of consumers. So with that, I will ask for the presentation.
This is Trish. Stacy Townsend, our LATC enforcement analyst, will present this item.
Hi, this is Stacy. So I just another brief overview. The California Architects Board was mandated to require architects complete 5 hours of continuing education on disability access requirements prior to renewal of their license. And most recently, the AIA is going to submit a proposal to require CE requirements in zero net carbon design. And the board is in support of that proposal. And then recently, the American Society of Landscape Architects Sierra chapter contacted LATC to requesting that a discussion begin on the requirement for continuing education for landscape architects. Enforcement related, over the past 5 fiscal years, there's only been 5 citations issued to licensees, and it was for violations of the contract requirement and rules of professional conduct. And then there was 10 letters of advisement issued for violations of rules of professional conduct, the contract requirements, and also negligence. There were no disciplinary actions taken against any licensees. I researched other landscape architect registration boards, and 75% of those boards require licensees to complete CE for license renewal, varying between 12 to 32 hours. All of them require a minimum number of hours in health, safety, and welfare of the public. At this December 2nd, 2020 committee meeting, it was requested by the members for additional research on continuing education in other landscape architecture jurisdictions, and then also knowing what regulations have recently changed and the fiscal and time impact CE requirements would have on staff. So in answering those requests, it was found that the majority of landscape architect registration boards requiring CE made the decision as a board. And all the decisions to require CE of landscape architects were to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the public. As far as staff time, at this time it would be difficult to determine what the fiscal and time impact of CE requirements would have on staff. Factors would include whether LATC would approve courses and or providers, the auditing of licensees for compliance, and the enforcement of non-compliance would all factor into the time. And then additionally, in the past 5 years, there's only been one statutory change, is Business and Professions Code Section 5616 on the contract requirements. However, there are proposed amendments that would affect the practice of landscape architecture, which is BPC Section 5659, inclusion of license number requirement, and also California Code of Regulations, Section 2671, Public Presentments and Advertising Requirements. Most recently, at the April 29th, 2020 meeting, members continue to express the need for additional research, researching the landscape architecture jurisdictions requiring CE and whether an association between the requirement and enforcement or health, safety, and welfare issues were found, to assess the CSE to determine if there were any specific areas of practice that could be a potential CE requirement, reaching out to the California Council of ASLA to inquire on whether they think there is a critical need for CE, and then surveying the California licensee population. And reaching out to the other jurisdictions that require CE, I received responses from 28 of the 39 jurisdictions, and most of the jurisdictions did not find an association or were unable to tell due to a lack of cases against licensees. However, Missouri attributed their lack of enforcement cases against licensees to their CE requirement. An assessment of the CSE found that the test is comprised of topics related to site assessment, program development, design process, and construction documents and contract performance. And over the past 3 fiscal years, candidates performed the poorest in program development, and then followed by construction documents and contract performance. Staff collaborated with Committee Chair John Roshinsky to develop a survey regarding CE that was sent out to every California licensed landscape architect that had an email on file with LATC. So the survey ended up being sent to 3,682 licensees, and only 658 participated. The results of those that participated showed a pretty even number, 50-50, on who already was taking CE and who were not taking continuing education courses. Of the ones that do already participate in CE, approximately 42% of those hold a license in other jurisdictions that do require CE for license renewal. Most of the licensees that already take CE complete between 1 and 5 hours, and then followed by 6 to 10 hours. And the CE is obtained in multiple subject areas, and the price varied from either free or $100 or less. And then those licensees that are already participating in CE feel that 0 to 5 hours would be a reasonable requirement, and then followed by 6 to 10 hours. And then of the 50% who do not currently take continuing education courses on their own, said that they keep abreast of changes in a variety of ways, which includes publications, research, practicing in their profession, conferences, and from other professionals. And most licensees that are not currently taking CE feel that there are current issues within the landscape architecture profession, ranging from environmental solutions to design, among other topics. And then the survey results for the ones that are not currently taking continuing education showed that about 75% of them feel that 0 to 5 hours would be a reasonable requirement for renewal. So you have 3 attachments. 2 of them you have already seen in previous meetings, and then the third one is just graphs showing the survey results.
All right. Any comments, questions on any of this? Andy?
Well, I'd be interested to know what the Sierra chapter actually was expecting as far as CE requirements. I mean, what topics were they looking for?
I did reach out to them, but I did not receive a response.
So, I mean, it's great to be able to say, hey, I think we should institute continuing education for everybody. But in what? I mean, if we had a little bit more guidance and, to say, well, take courses in public health, safety, and welfare. Well, that's kind of a general general thing. And I think there has to be a demonstrated need. I'm not saying that I'm against having continuing education, but it's like, well, okay, if we're going to mandate it, we better really have our ducks lined up to demonstrate that, yeah, this is needed, and it's beneficial to the people of California that we get that continuing education to be able to protect them. So right now, I'm not necessarily seeing that in the, the information that we have presented right at the moment. If we have so few cases, and I mean, what are we going to do? Say, okay, well, you should take a course in contracts or professional practice or whatever it happens to be. It's like, okay, well, do you need to take that course every 2 years? I mean, once you do it, you learn it, and then do you need to learn it again? Or do you need a refresher course? Same thing with MWELO. It's like, do we need to take refresher courses on MWELO every couple of years? Those are the questions that I've got. I actually would be interested to hear the architects, viewpoint too, as far as their requirements for accessibility. They're having to take courses on that every 2 years. Do the standards change that often, where every 2 years you need a refresher course on it? I don't know. It just seems kind of odd to me.
Pamela?
Thank you. Pamela Brief. First off, I wanted to thank staff for continuing on this journey and continuing to provide us more information as we requested. Thank you very much. As far as the findings, I will say on a personal level, I was hoping to see more of a connection between health, safety, and welfare and continuing education, because that is our charge. And so, and based on the report and what Stacy has reported today to us, I'm not seeing that correlation. Therefore, in my opinion, it does not seem to support that CEUs are necessary to protect health, safety, and welfare of consumers as it relates to landscape architecture. I think there are other reasons that it is important, but as it specifically relates to the health, safety, and welfare of the consumer, I don't see a correlation.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I don't want to use the word surprise, but looking at the survey results itself, it's a little over 40% said they weren't even sure if there's any issues out there that we need to be concerned about or whatever. And I guess you could read that two different ways. It's like either they're completely clueless, or else they don't see anything really directly affecting their chosen practice. Because the second highest thing was a little over 16% responded no, that they clearly don't see any issues out there. So I guess it does kind of beg the question, is this an answer looking for a problem? But I think, we're fortunate that we're in a profession that doesn't have a lot of enforcement issues, just simply because, we sort of make sure that anybody that gets a license in the first place is qualified, and that it seems like most of the work that we do, there's other avenues to address issues. If there's the civil courts, if you do harm to somebody, you can be sued there. So I agree. I think that it's really good that we've gone this course and we've, made an effort to really look at this. But I know in my talking with Trish about the results of the survey and some other things, I think maybe the best course of action at this point in time is to go back to the Sierra chapter and CCASLA and say, here's sort of the results of what we found. And if you think that there's, specific issues out there that you need to see addressed, then I think you need to come back to us and let us know specifically what that is. Because I'm not sure really how much further that we can take this without that being identified. Susan?
Yes, thank you. So what I thought was interesting is out of 3,682 licenses, only 658 actually did participate. That's a fairly low percentage. I know I almost missed the survey that I got. It went into my junk folder, so I had to find it to respond to it. So part of the reason that I was promoting continuing education is the biggest category is around ADA. And I think it would be interesting to contact some of the larger cities to see if what landscape architects are doing have to, like, is there 4 or 5 reviews till they get it right? And are people that are doing public work really clearly understand ADA? And even if you do residential work, having some level of, I don't want to say understanding, because you do understand it, but the laws have changed slightly. But people like us, some of us that have been around for a really long time, and unless you're directly working in that area of work, you may not know a lot of this minutia of ADA. So I was promoting this for continuing education. I was kind of surprised that 40% of the people didn't think it was necessary. And I don't know if I would equate people that have submitted grievances to look at violations, because not everybody takes that much of a proactive approach. They may feel there's a violation, but don't take the time to submit it and go through the process. And I've always kind of been surprised how low our numbers are of how many people submit, because I personally know of several issues that I would have submitted, but being on the board, I'm reluctant to to submit them. So I'll go with what the majority of everybody wants, but I was helping to promote the CEs. And it would be interesting to see what the Sierra Club wants. Is it regarding public health and safety, or is it just this would be nice that they know more about this?
Pamela? Oh, okay.
I had forgotten to unraise my hand. My apologies.
Shame on you.
At least I remembered to unmute myself to tell you that I raised my hand. So I'm getting better here.
Yeah. Well, Patricia, I know you're involved in a lot of different, especially a lot of public works. Are you seeing particular issues that you think LAs in general would, should be concerned with?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a handful of items. So, one is the ADA. I think that's very appropriate. Ours probably wouldn't be as robust as the architects, but there's that, and then some of the climate change repercussions that are starting to occur a lot more regularly. So fires, just having, I think it'd be appropriate to have some CEs in that respect, and then also water use. But at the same time, I mean, I think this, would be a logistical nightmare, managing it and, getting it going. And, I guess the other thing is, we've talked about this in the past, and, we have a different governor now, but in the past, this was not supported by our previous governor. So it'd almost be nice to kind of have a better understanding before we start going down this route too far, to kind of understand where the state kind of stands on that, because I just hate to spend a whole lot of time and money and energy and then just, we hit a brick wall, so to speak, and it's not going to happen. So
So does that mean we wait till after the recall election? The governor may change, you don't know, right? Wait till November.
Yeah. I see that Ron Jones has his hand up. Ron, if you'd like to comment. Ron, if you're speaking, I think you're still muted. There you go.
My apologies. My apologies. I think the question earlier was raised about what architects are doing with regards to continuing education, and I think it was reported earlier that with AB 1010, we have now expanded our continuing education requirements, 5 units of which is ADA accessibility requirements, and the other is basically more environmental and sustainability. I should also mention that we recognize in our efforts, or in our assessment, that California actually has the lowest continuing education requirement, or one of the lowest continuing education requirements in the entire nation. And so we were encouraged to basically do more, if for no other reason, because we just recognize, as someone mentioned earlier, that in California, natural disasters are really prevalent, accessibility litigation is really prevalent. So these are things that we felt as practitioners we should address head on. And lastly, I should mention, I am a residential architect, servicing primarily large subdivisions and multifamily projects. And the voice of advocacy of our landscape architects as part of the solution driven team is really helpful. And to be able to address both site constraints, accessibility constraints, C3 requirements, all those things, and having that advocacy voice from both the landscape architect and the civil engineer are extremely valuable in those conversations. So I'll yield back the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess that raises a question. Do we know, as far as the civil engineers or engineering community in general, do they currently have CE requirements here in California?
This is Stacy, and no, they do not.
Okay. All right. So I'm not sure if we let's see, I'm looking at here. If we need to put together a motion of where we're at right now. As I mentioned, I think maybe what we do is we go back out to the Sierra chapter in particular and CCASLA in general and just kind of put it on them to come back to us if they think this needs to go further at this point in time. And we could direct staff to do that, draft a letter to go back out to them. Andy?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question if Tracy is still on the line.
Yeah, she is. She'll get a chance to speak when I open it up to public.
Okay, good, because I think it'd be important to hear from CCASLA
Right.
what their position is, because we did get that letter from Joy earlier in the week.
Right.
That wasn't brought up, previously as public comment, but I think it's important that we note what was presented in that letter, because they're asking us to take into consideration certain things that, like the amount of staff time and the need, describing an actual need for continuing education and things like that. So I think it's important to get that viewpoint.
Right. Another issue that I've spoke with Trish about is this is a current strategic plan objective that they've been working on, and I think the excellent work that she and the staff have put together to present to us is kind of in fulfillment of what the current direction was to them. And so the question is, our next meeting in November, which will be our strategic planning meeting, whether or not we need to dedicate any more time to this in that meeting, or set this aside at that point and dedicate our time to other issues that might be coming up. So I'm just curious what the other committee members' thoughts are on that.
I'd like you to open the public hearing so we
Mhm.
do hear from her.
Okay. All right. At this point in time, I think it will be important to hear from Tracy, so I'll open up the public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've opened up the Q&A panel, so if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, and we had Tracy that would like to make a comment. So Tracy, I'm going to unmute you, and that will enable you to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I forgot to introduce myself for anybody else who's on the line. I'm the executive director of the California Council of the American Society of Landscape Architects, and the Sierra chapter. Think about it. They're in Sacramento, highly competitive atmosphere in that city. A lot of state contracts. Apparently, they were seeing a lot of mistakes being made by other firms. But, just like with San Diego chapter and maybe others, nobody wants to blow the whistle on the other person. But we need to get clear from them and from anybody else what would be helpful to the industry. Patricia hit it right on the head. We've got to tell people about defensible space. We've got to teach people. San Diego chapter did an ADA, education program. We invited the San Diego AIA to be part of it. And they said, oh, you're only going to address 2 parts of the 5-part ADA class that some of these instructors teach. And they said, we're not interested. And yet it was really interesting. The demographics of the people who attended that meeting were your younger, members who are learning more about the profession. They're learning more about what what's going to happen down the road. And the instructor, I love this. He said, "You are not designing just for those people who are not able to walk across the park or walk up the trail. You're designing for yourself, down the road." And they all laughed and just thought that was pretty funny. But it's true. We've got to be looking at design for now and for the future. And I think that's why, my husband's a CPA. He has to take 80 hours every 2 years, whereas a real estate agent has to take 40 hours of education every 4 years. So it is kind of all over the map for the various professions. But with those 2 professions, you can do more harm with the consumer, with whatever their real estate sale is or whatever their tax implications are. I think for our members and even for AIA members, maybe we do, I have no problem doing another survey of at least our 4 chapters and find out from the members who believe in investing in their professional, future, by being members of ASLA, what their thoughts are. If the LATC would like to have some additional input on this, let me know what you need from me.
All right, thank you, Tracy. Any thoughts from the committee?
Yeah,
Susan?
I'll add one more thing that just happened here, and it was also in the news in San Francisco. We put in parklets in downtown on our 5 blocks, and you had to deal with the curb. So all the tables were down the 6 inches in the street versus the sidewalk. And there was a group of lawyers and people that literally walked down the street and dinged every single one of our parklet people because they didn't have a platform at grade with the sidewalk. And I think there were 12 businesses that paid pretty heavy fines. And then in the San Francisco news, they were talking about a company that had 120 lawsuits, and a lot of them stemmed out of the new parklets not being compliant. And the access across from the curb cut and into the bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. So it seems like ADA is definitely becoming more of a bigger topic. And as more and more things outside, whether it be the parklets or other solutions, that it makes it more valuable to have a better understanding of ADA. And that has been my push for a lot of us around accessibility. So it's just food for thought.
This is a moderator. I don't see any further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
I know I think we went a little out of order on that, but it was important to hear from Tracy as part of this discussion. In all honesty, I'm not really sure where we go from here on this right now. I don't know if we need to make a motion on anything.
I would make a recommendation that we table the discussion until after our November meeting, because we are going to be redoing our strategic plan. And this was in the previous strategic plan. So we have a new member, and it would be good, or 2 of you guys are new since the last one. It would be good to hear as part of the bigger discussion in November. Plus, we'll know if we have a new governor by then.
Yeah.
I would agree. This is Patricia. That I think we need to have some more conversations about it. And in the meantime, we can get some more feedback from the Sierra chapter, so we understand kind of where they were coming from.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Andy, and I would agree with that. I mean, I think Tracy's thought about polling the 4 chapters of ASLA and trying to see if we can come up with some kind of list of suggestions. I mean, because we have 3,600 licensees. You're going to mandate something to all these people that they're going to have to comply with, and it would have to be a decision. Is this every 2 years? And how many hours of continuing education is it going to take in order for it to be felt that they've now learned whatever it is that we're determined that they've got to learn?
Right.
So, and again, coming back to the architects and the accessibility access, courses that they take for continuing education. It's like, well, I asked the question earlier, and I'm still not sure that I understand, but how many times do you need to take that course in order for you to have learned it? I mean, does it change that often? And it's very possible that it does, and codes change, and I get that. But once you've learned it, you've kind of learned it. And, so not meaning to beat a dead horse, but is it something that needs to be mandated that you take it every 2 years?
Mhm.
That's the question I've got in my mind. So Tracy mentioned that the San Diego chapter did a ADA meeting, and okay, that's great, and it handled whatever information it was for landscape oriented type situations. But does that need to happen? I mean, does somebody need to take that class every 2 years in
Mhm.
order to say that they understand it? So that's my point. Is like, where do you draw the line between what is mandated courses that you are required to take and retake every 2 years versus taking it one time, learning it, taking an exam if that's what you want to make them do. But okay, once you pass it, you pass it. You don't take the LAIR exam every 2 years. You don't need to. You took it one time.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you knew everything or that that you couldn't learn new stuff as well. I mean, there's obviously new information that comes down the pike all the time. It's just a matter of, are you going to require that people take courses, in order to learn that stuff or relearn
Right.
it.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, I guess one thought is that, currently for the architects, it's, it's AIA that basically took the lead on expanding their CE requirement, because they, perceive that climate action is definitely an area that all architects should be sort of up to speed on. Maybe what we do is we go, back to the Sierra chapter and ASLA and basically say, under the right circumstances, we'll support an effort like that, but you basically need to take the lead on this and demonstrate the particular areas where you see concern and where CEs might address that. Because I just don't see how we can, how we can do that without input from the industry anyway.
Something else that comes to mind, I took some classes several years ago, so that our firm could get a lower rate on our professional liability insurance. So that was driven by the insurance company. Basically the insurance company, hey, you take these classes, we can reduce the rate that we charge you. That kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that, so there's that aspect of it as well. But that was driven by the insurance company wanting to reduce their exposure to our potential liability.
Right.
So they figured, okay, if you get more educated in this, that's going to save us money in the long run in payouts for claims. So, that all has to play hand in hand in this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, where do we go? I don't know.
I'd made a recommendation that we table this discussion until after the November strategic planning meeting.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Sure.
Okay. And
I second. It's
a
Patricia.
second on that.
As far as a discussion, Mr. Chair, I would like to suggest, though, that this topic be agendized for the strategic planning session so that we can actually discuss it in more depth.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully by then, we'll have CCSLA's poll that Tracy said that she would be able to do. So
Mhm.
hopefully if we can get that back in time for a presentation so that we can at least be discussing that. Because I don't want to have this discussion again in November where we're just keep discussing it and kicking the can down the road.
Right.
You know, we need to make a decision on this, but right now we don't know what we're making a decision on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could pound the table and say, yep, okay, we're going to have continuing education requirements. On what? How many hours? How often? So
Right.
I mean, so that all that's would have to be hashed out. And then you're going to get those people that are going to be upset because you're making them take classes that they don't feel that they need or want. They could say, well, that doesn't affect my area of practice. I don't do that kind of work. So, you know, we need to be prepared for all of that.
Right. Yeah. So Susan,
I would ask
would you?
our legal person, I forget his name right now, I'm drawing a blank, it's getting late, if we do need to agendize it as a separate item or if it just is part of the whole bigger strategic planning discussion.
I think that's up to the committee. I would think that it would already be on for your strategic plan because it looks like it was an item on your prior 2019 to 2021 strategic plan.
So then my motion would stand the way it was made.
Do you want to add to your motion, Susan, that we send a letter to CCASLA, basically asking them to provide information for the strategic planning session, as Andy
Yes.
suggested?
Yes. As an
Okay.
amendment, yes.
Okay. So do you want to restate your motion?
I recommend that we defer this topic until our strategic planning session to have it be part of the bigger conversation. And in the meantime, the staff reaches out to the ASLA, CCASLA, and the Sierra Club for their input.
Okay, and do I have a second again? I guess, Patricia?
Yeah, I second.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Okay, I guess I will open it up for public comment one more time based on the current motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. This is a moderator. I see no request for comment at this time. Mr. Chair, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right, thank you. All right, well, we have a motion, and if I can paraphrase, it is to table this discussion to be continued at the strategic planning meeting in November, and to work with staff to draft a letter and send that to CCASLA to query their members on what issues that they see warranting potential CEs, and we'll take that under advisement during the meeting.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. With that, I'll call the roll call vote. Andy Bowden,
Aye.
Pamela Brief,
Aye.
Susan Landry,
Aye.
Patricia Trouth,
Aye.
and John Roshinsky is an aye. The motion carries unanimously. All right, we will move on to item O, review of future committee meeting dates. And Trish, if you can take that one.
Okay, there is a board meeting on September 9th and 10th. It's a Tuesday, including strategic planning in Sacramento. We'll need to identify if there is a committee member who might be able to attend that. And then we have our meeting on November 4th and 5th, second day being strategic planning, also here in person in Sacramento. And then the board has their final meeting of the year on December 10th in the Bay Area.
So I know, Pamela, I know you notified me that you had originally thought that you'd be able to make the September 9th and 10th meeting, but something's come up and you can't do that.
Correct.
And I believe, Andy, you've already indicated that you're unavailable for that as well. And I know that I am going on vacation on the 10th, so I will be unavailable. So I'm going to ask if either Susan or Patricia might be available to attend that meeting. I don't know if there'll be a virtual option or.
Yeah.
I cannot commit right now. My daughter's coming out, and I won't know for a couple weeks of when she's coming from New York. So I'm leaving September open at this point.
I am traveling on the 10th, so the 10th wouldn't work. Is it going to be virtual? Do we know? Will that be an option?
I guess Laura could address that.
It's going, at this point, it's going to be an in-person meeting, but the governor's executive order will still be in place. So we could potentially have a virtual option that we could try to provide for attendees. So I'll check on that and get back to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because what I was going to say is if there is a virtual option, I could probably sit in on at least on the 9th, but the 10th would definitely be out for me. All right. So I guess I'm not, well, if there's no further discussion on that, I'll open it, this item up for public comment if anybody has any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am opening up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, this is a moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Mr. Chair, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right, thank you. All right, well, I guess that concludes our meeting. I will ask if there's any final comments from the committee. Susan?
Yeah, I just would like to compliment staff. These packages are a tremendous amount of work, not only just writing the reports, but the research and the background stuff that they have to do to put the packet together. And they continually do a great job, and I just want to give them kudos and thank them for all their hard work.
Thank you very much. This is Trish, and all of the staff here at LUPC work very hard, and I appreciate the acknowledgement. And I'm glad that the material is very helpful for the meeting. So thank you again.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd like to ditto that, as well as commend the committee members for your continued dedication, and I'm honored to be serving with each one of you.
And you do a great job too, John.
Thank
You
you.
do, John, yes. And it was, yeah, it was a
Great.
good meeting. Thank you to everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to actually meeting everybody or seeing everybody in person. Pam, we haven't met you in person, but it'll be so nice. Hopefully it'll still be in person by the time we get to November.
Yeah.
I sure hope so. It'll be very nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
All right. With that, I will call the meeting to adjournment at 3:09.
Have a
All
good
right.
week, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, John.